You have been doing it in the wrong order, not the birding itself, not the intention behind it, but the sequence of decisions that determine whether your yard succeeds or fails at attracting blue jays. Most people focus almost entirely on what they put in the feeder, the seed brand, the premium mix, the special blend marketed for corvids and larger birds. And that focus is understandable, because it is the part the product industry emphasizes and the part that feels controllable. But there is a decision that happens before you ever open the seed bag, before you walk out to the yard with anything in your hands, that matters more than everything that comes after it. It is the decision about what kind of feeder is hanging on that hook in the first place. And if you got that decision wrong, and most people do, then everything you put in it is effectively irrelevant. The blue jays in your neighborhood already know the answer. You can see it in the way they fly past your yard without stopping, day after day, while the feeder sits full of seed, and the birds it was supposedly designed to attract remain absent. The problem is visible if you know what to look for. Stand in your yard on a calm morning and watch your feeder for a few minutes. Even without wind, there is movement. A slight sway as the hook adjusts under the weight, a rotation of a few degrees when the air shifts, and when a bird lands on it, the whole structure tips under the weight, because the physics of a hanging object are unambiguous. Anything that lands on one side shifts the center of gravity and produces movement. For a house sparrow, which weighs about an ounce, this movement is manageable. For a blue jay, which weighs closer to 3 ounces and needs to perform a specific, deliberate, physically demanding interaction with its food before it will commit to eating or caching it. That movement is a fundamental problem, and the bird's response to it is not patience or adaptation. It is departure. Now look at what you are actually trying to fill that feeder with. Peanuts in the shell, whole, raw, with the shell intact, which is what blue jays need if you want to trigger the caching behavior that makes a yard worth returning to day after day. What the bird does with a whole peanut when it encounters one at a food source is worth understanding in detail, because it is the behavior that the entire setup needs to support. The bird picks up the peanut. It holds it crosswise in its bill and shakes it, a lateral motion, feeling the weight distribution of the kernel inside against the mass of the shell. A dense, well-developed kernel sits differently in the shell than a light, shriveled one, and the bird can read that difference through the mechanics of the shake. Based on what it feels, it makes a decision. Is this peanut worth the energy expenditure of carrying it to a cache site, sometimes several hundred yards or more away, and burying it for retrieval during the winter months when food becomes scarce? If the answer is yes, the peanut goes into the bird's gular pouch, an elastic expandable sac in the throat that allows multiple peanuts to be transported simultaneously. If the answer is no, the peanut gets dropped and the next one gets picked up. This is the behavioral sequence that determines whether a blue jay treats your yard as a productive resource worth regular investment, and every single step of it requires a surface that does not move while it is happening. Shaking a peanut to assess its weight on a platform that is also swinging produces corrupted sensory data. The movement the bird creates by shaking the food is indistinguishable from the movement the platform is creating on its own, and the bird cannot run a reliable quality assessment under those conditions. This means the hanging feeder is failing at 2 separate levels simultaneously. It is a safety problem because the unstable surface prevents the rapid, directional escape launch that the bird depends on in the presence of aerial predators. And it is a sensory problem because the movement prevents the bird from getting accurate information about the food it is evaluating. 2 failures, both fundamental, both stemming from the same single structural choice you made before you filled the feeder for the first time. This is the hidden cause, the thing that is operating invisibly underneath the surface of what looks like a simple failure to attract birds. When you see blue jays fly past your yard without stopping, the story most people tell themselves is about the seed, or the location, or some mysterious preference the birds have that cannot be explained. The actual story is far more specific and far more correctable. The structure you placed in your yard before you put any food in it was sending a signal, and the signal said this surface is not safe and not functional. Blue jays received that signal and responded to it the way they respond to every environmental signal that their biology reads as unfavorable. They incorporated the assessment into their territorial map and began rooting around your yard, not because of anything about your yard that cannot be changed, but because of a specific, identifiable design choice that can be corrected in an afternoon. Before getting to the correction, it is worth spending a moment on why this particular mistake is so prevalent, because understanding it changes how you look at the entire commercial birding industry. Hanging tube feeders dominate the market for reasons that have nothing to do with the needs of the birds they are marketed for. They are easy to fill because you pour seed in from the top. They are easy to hang because they come with hooks and chains already attached. They are easy to clean because most models come apart for washing. They look attractive in a garden setting. They are visible from inside the house, which is where the purchasing decision is usually made. And for the species that constitute the majority of backyard bird traffic in most American suburbs, small sparrows, finches, chickadees, nuthatches, they function adequately because those birds are lightweight enough that the feeder's movement under their landing is minimal, and they do not have the specific food assessment routine that blue jays run. The tube feeder was optimized for the customer and for the most common customer experience, which involves seeing birds at the feeder quickly and easily. It was not optimized for blue jays, and because blue jays were printed on the label of the seed inside it, the implicit message was that the feeder was suitable when it demonstrably is not. The connection to traditional farming practices and the agricultural communities that appear in backyard birding content under labels like the Amish method or the old farmer's way is worth addressing directly, because it is regularly used as marketing language and almost never explained in a way that illuminates anything useful. What that language is actually pointing at is a structural observation. Traditional working farms are environments where nearly every surface a bird might land on is wide, flat, and completely immovable, because farms are built for livestock management, grain storage, and daily agricultural work, all of which require structures that are solid and stable under real working conditions. Fence rails built from heavy timber to hold cattle, the flat stone edges of water troughs, wide timber window ledges on barns where grain was stored, and where ventilation gaps let birds in and out freely. Cut stumps left at field edges because removing them was less important than the other work that needed doing. None of these surfaces were placed with corvids in mind. All of them are, from a blue jay's biological perspective, exactly what the bird needs. Wide, stable, fixed platforms with clear sight lines to the surrounding area and nearby elevated escape routes in the form of mature trees. The farmers who maintained these properties did not design their land with bird feeding in mind, and the knowledge that blue jays consistently use their properties, rather than the more ornamental suburban yards nearby, was not the result of any deliberate ornithological understanding. It was the result of the land doing what working land does, being built solidly and maintained practically, and wildlife responding to the physical characteristics of that environment in the way wildlife has always responded to them. When the observation got translated into phrases like "the Amish knew the secret" or "the old farming trick," it picked up a layer of mysticism that was never part of the original reality. There is no secret. There is a structural observation about what kind of surface a specific bird needs, and the evidence for it has been sitting on every working farm in the eastern United States since before commercial birding products existed. Now let's talk about correction, because this is where the story becomes practically useful. Removing the hanging tube feeder and replacing it with a fixed platform is the single most impactful change you can make to your blue jay setup, and it does not require any specialized product. The essential specification is wide, flat, and fixed. A piece of untreated lumber, cedar or pine, approximately 12 to 16 inches wide and 16 to 20 inches long, screwed firmly to the top of a fence post or mounted securely to a railing or deck edge, satisfies every requirement. The surface needs to be wide enough that a blue jay can land without its feet hanging off the edges, which is a realistic concern on many commercial platform feeders that are designed decoratively rather than functionally. It needs to be mounted with enough hardware that pushing down firmly on one corner produces no flex or movement, and it needs to be positioned where the bird can see clearly in every direction while it is using it, with no dense vegetation immediately adjacent that could conceal an approaching predator, and with a tall escape route, a mature tree or elevated structure, within comfortable flight distance. Test your platform before you put food on it. Stand next to it and push down on one corner as hard as you can. If the post flexes or the platform rocks, add reinforcement. Then do it again. A blue jay landing on this surface is exerting the full weight of its body plus the momentum of landing, and any flex in the structure will be detected immediately. When you are confident the surface holds completely rigid under that pressure, it passes. What you put on that surface matters, and the specification is more precise than most seed aisle guidance suggests. Whole raw peanuts in the shell are the primary offering, and the reason every word in that description matters is worth unpacking. Whole means not split, cracked, or halved. The shell must be intact, because the shell is what provides the information the bird needs during its weight assessment. A peanut with a damaged or removed shell provides no shaking data, nothing for the bird to evaluate, and an item it cannot evaluate is an item it has no reason to cache. Raw means not roasted, not salted. Roasting changes the internal structure and smell of the peanut in ways that affect its quality as a cached food item. Salting is the more serious issue from a health standpoint, because sodium at the concentrations found in commercially salted peanuts accumulates in a bird system in a way that avian kidneys are not designed to process safely. The bird may not refuse salted peanuts instinctively, because the salt concentration is not high enough to produce an immediate negative reaction. But regular consumption contributes to dehydration and kidney stress over time, and there is no reason to introduce this risk when raw peanuts are equally available and cost comparable through feed stores or grocery bulk sections. Sunflower seeds in the shell work as a strong secondary offering for the same reasons the peanuts do. The shell is intact, the assessment process is supported, the food item provides real quality information when evaluated. Whole dried corn on the cob, or as shelled whole kernels, adds a third dimension to the food variety, without violating any of the principles that make the other items effective. What does not belong on this platform is the mixed commercial seed blend you have probably been using, because those blends are composed primarily of millet, cracked corn, safflower, and hulled sunflower chips, none of which provide the physical integrity that blue jay feeding behavior requires, and all of which will attract the sparrows and doves that have been dominating your yard, while the jays stayed away. There is one more element that needs to come into the picture before the setup is complete, and it is the element that most backyard birding advice treats as optional, when it is actually essential for blue jays specifically. Water in motion, not a static bird bath sitting in a garden corner, but water that is actively moving, dripping, rippling, producing a sound that carries through the air around your yard. The reason water movement matters so much for blue jays comes from how these birds navigate their territory. A blue jay flying a patrol circuit above your neighborhood is not scanning the ground for individual objects like feeders and bird baths, the way you might scan a street for a specific building. It is using sound as much as vision to identify productive locations, and still water does not produce sound. A bird bath that has been sitting unchanged for 3 days is acoustically the same as the surrounding lawn. A bird bath with a slow drip falling into it is producing a continuous, directional signal that carries significantly further than the visual cue of the water surface itself, and that signal registers to a corvid's auditory system as moving fresh water, which carries the same positive biological associations that moving water has carried for this species across its entire evolutionary history. Clean, oxygenated, safe to drink. A solar-powered recirculating pump that lifts water from the bath and drops it back in through a drip nozzle achieves this at low cost and minimal maintenance. The basin needs to be cleaned regularly enough that the water stays clear, because a corvid that visits a water source and finds it warm, green, and smelling of algae will update its territorial map accordingly and assign that location a low reliability rating. The positioning of the bath matters for the same reasons the feeder platform's positioning matters. Open area with clear sight lines. Escape route within comfortable flight distance. No dense low vegetation within 10 to 12 feet that could provide cover for a ground predator approaching, while the bird is occupied with bathing. Put all of these elements together and consider what you have built. A stable, wide, fixed platform that supports the bird's food assessment behavior without introducing any movement or safety compromise. Whole raw peanuts in the shell that activate the caching impulse and give the bird a reason to return day after day to collect and evaluate the resource. A drip-equipped bird bath in an open, accessible location that broadcasts the yard's presence acoustically to birds navigating above it. Each of these elements was present on traditional working farmsteads, not because those farms were designed for birds, but because building a functional farm happens to produce all of them as incidental consequences. The stable surfaces were there because farms need stable surfaces. The whole unprocessed food items were there because farms store food before processing. The moving water was there because farming requires water in constant use. What you are doing when you replace a hanging tube feeder with a platform, fill it with whole raw peanuts, and add a drip to your bird bath is not replicating some ancient technique or uncovering a forgotten secret. You are removing 3 specific sources of negative signal from your yard and replacing them with the conditions that blue jay biology has always been selecting for. The bird is not being attracted by novelty. It is simply finding, for the first time in its interactions with your property, conditions that its physiology and its evolutionary programming recognize as appropriate. The feeder is stable. The food is accessible. The water is audible. The yard has passed the test it was always being subjected to, invisibly, every time a blue jay flew over it without stopping. Stop doing this before filling your feeder. Stop hanging something that sways. Stop filling it with seeds that cannot be individually evaluated by a bird running a caching assessment. Stop placing water in a location where it cannot be heard or safely used. Make those 3 changes, and the blue jays that have been flying past your yard will begin stopping, because the yard will finally be giving them the answers their biology has been looking for. If any one of these elements deserves more depth than this video provided, let us know in the comments which part you want examined further. And if this finally clarified why your setup has been failing despite your best efforts, give the video a like and subscribe, because there is a great deal more of this kind of content on the way.